My name is Grace C. Varney. I'm 32 years old, and the relationship I ended didn't explode in some dramatic, cinematic way. There was no screaming match, no wine glass thrown against a wall, no final speech sharpened over weeks of resentment. It ended with a sentence so casual it almost sounded boring, and maybe that was the worst part. Evan and I had been together a little over 3 years. We had been living together for just under one. On paper, it looked balanced. Shared apartment, shared life, shared future, at least in the vague way people say that when they still want the comfort of commitment without having to define it too clearly. In reality, I carried most of the weight. Rent, utilities, internet, groceries half the time, even when we said we were splitting them. Evan liked to say he was between financial chapters, which sounded a lot more poetic than unemployed, inconsistent, and mysteriously unavailable whenever bills were due. It happened on a Tuesday night right after dinner. I was standing at the sink loading the dishwasher. The apartment smelled like garlic and detergent, and there was that ordinary end-of-day quiet settling in, the kind that makes you think nothing important is about to happen. Evan was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone with the expression he'd been wearing a lot lately. Annoyed at something he hadn't named yet. Short fuse, constant sighs, the general energy of a man who had started treating me less like a partner and more like the furniture. Then, without looking up, he said, "Just a heads up. My ex-girlfriend is staying with us for a while." I stopped rinsing a plate. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. What? He still didn't look at me. "She's between places. It's temporary." I waited for the rest. The explanation. The part where he acknowledged how insane that sounded. Maybe a sentence that started with, "I know this is a lot," or "I wanted to ask how you felt," or even just, "I'm sorry this is weird." Instead, he added, flat and final, "This isn't up for discussion, by the way." That tone. He used it on customer service reps, on delivery drivers, on anyone he had already decided didn't matter enough to negotiate with. Hearing it directed at me did something strange. Not sharp, not loud, just clean. Like a wire inside me, finally snapping without drama. I asked how long "a while" meant. He shrugged. "However long it takes." Then, because he apparently hadn't done enough damage yet, he said, "Don't be dramatic. You know we're just friends now." This was the same ex-girlfriend he had once described as toxic. The same one he said lied to him, manipulated him, cheated on him, all depending on which version of the story was useful that month. The same woman whose name still appeared on his phone, often enough that he had become visibly irritated whenever I noticed. I looked at him and realized something almost unsettling. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just said, "No problem." That finally got his attention. He looked up from his phone and smiled, surprised, pleased, relieved in that quick, unconscious way people are when their gamble works. "See?" he said. "I knew you'd be mature about it." I dried my hands on a dish towel, folded it once, and walked to the bedroom. Behind me, he laughed lightly. "What are you doing?" "Getting out of the way," I said. He thought I was bluffing. That was obvious from the tone he used when he followed me to the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame like this was a performance I'd get tired of any minute. "You're seriously doing this?" he asked. "Over my ex crashing here for a bit?" I didn't answer. I pulled a duffel bag from the closet and started packing with a kind of calm that felt almost mechanical. Not dramatic, not frantic. My body seemed to understand the decision faster than my mind did. Shirts, jeans, laptop charger, toiletries, passport. Documents from the nightstand drawer Evan never opened because he said it was too chaotic in there. He scoffed. "Grace, you are so insecure." I zipped one side of the bag and finally looked at him. "Then she's lucky you volunteered my home." That made him straighten a little. "It's our place," he snapped. That almost made me laugh. The lease was in both our names, yes. That part was technically true. But the rent had come from me. The utilities had come from me. The internet. The streaming subscriptions. The boring, invisible infrastructure that makes a life run smoothly. Evan always acted like we were splitting things because saying it that way helped him sleep at night. He followed me into the living room while I grabbed a second bag. "You said no problem," he reminded me, already shifting into his preferred script where I was irrational and he was simply trying to understand. "I meant it," I said. "No problem for me." That seemed to short-circuit him. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then landed on, "You're overreacting." I kept moving. "You'll be back once you cool off." There it was. Not concern. Assumption. The confidence of a man who believed I would always return to my assigned place eventually, because I always had before, because every previous line he crossed had been followed by my patience, my explanation, my adjustment. I lifted my second bag. Don't be ridiculous, he said. I'm not choosing her over you. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. You already did, I said. You just didn't think it counted if you didn't say it out loud. He laughed then. That sharp, dismissive laugh people use when reality is brushing too close and they need to push it back. You're being insane. Maybe. But I opened the door anyway. Behind me, he called out, louder now, irritated rather than worried. Just text me when you're done with your little tantrum. I didn't respond. I carried both bags down the stairs and out into the night, and with every step, two things became clearer. One, I wasn't coming back. And two, Evan had absolutely no idea what his life actually looked like without me covering the unglamorous parts of it. That was the part he was about to learn. I ended up on my friend Tessa's couch that night. She opened the door in pajama pants, took one look at the bags in my hands, and didn't ask for the full story. Just stepped aside, handed me a blanket, and asked, "Wine or silence?" "Silence," I said. "Excellent choice." That was exactly what I needed. No analysis. No dramatic sympathy. Just a safe place to land while my brain caught up to what my body had already done. I slept better that night than I had in months. Deep, heavy, uninterrupted sleep. The kind that only happens when your nervous system stops bracing for the next small insult. When I woke up, sunlight was coming through the blinds, and for a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then my phone started vibrating across the coffee table like it had somewhere urgent to be. Evan. Missed call. Missed call. Missed call. Then texts. Are you serious right now? You didn't even stay to talk. This is childish. I stared at the screen, waiting for the one message that might have mattered. An apology. A sentence like maybe I handled that wrong. It never came. At 7:26, another text arrived. So when are you coming back? That was the moment I understood he truly believed this was temporary. He thought I had gone somewhere to cool off, maybe to prove a point, maybe to punish him a little, but that eventually I would return to the apartment and settle back into my role like always. He still didn't understand that something had ended the second he said my opinion didn't matter. I didn't reply. Instead, during my lunch break, I called the landlord. Calm voice, professional tone, clean facts. I told him I was vacating the apartment effective immediately, and that all future communication regarding rent, utilities coordination, and access would go through Evan. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're sure? He asked. You've been the primary contact. I'm sure. He hesitated again. Probably because I had always been the one who answered emails, sent payments on time, followed up on maintenance, did all the adult parts of renting that nobody notices until they stop getting done. Okay, he said finally. If that's your decision, send me his updated contact info and I'll note the file. I'll email it now. So I did. I forwarded Evan's phone number and email, copied the landlord and CC'd Evan so there would be no confusion. 5 minutes later, my phone lit up. Why did the landlord just email me? I looked at the message for a second, then typed back with the exact energy he had used on me the night before. Just a heads up, this isn't up for discussion. The typing bubbles appeared immediately. Stopped. Started again. Are you trying to punish me? I didn't answer. Because this wasn't punishment. Punishment would have required emotion. This was just alignment. He made a decision about the apartment without me. I made one about my participation in it. That evening, another text came through. Different tone. Shorter. He's already here. I pictured it instantly. His ex-girlfriend walking into the apartment like it was a soft landing. Her bag by the couch. Her shoes by the door. Evan moving through the space with the confidence of someone who still believed everything was under control. He thought he had rearranged his life. What he had actually done was remove the support beams and assume the structure would keep standing. Rent day was 4 days away. And for the first time since we moved in together, I wasn't going to be there to absorb the impact when reality arrived. By the next afternoon, the confidence in his messages had started to crack. He texted me like nothing major had happened. Can you send me the Wi-Fi password? I almost laughed. It was such a small question, but it revealed everything. The invisible labor, the account setup, the boring systems he had never bothered to understand because I had always handled them. It's in the email account you never check, I replied. He didn't answer for a while. Then another message arrived. Why is the internet bill in your name anyway? That question said more than he realized. Around 6, he called. I let it ring twice before answering. What is going on? He demanded immediately. No hello, no soft entry, just outrage. I leaned against Tessa's kitchen counter and looked out the window while he spoke. The landlord emailed me about rent and utilities. Why am I suddenly the point of contact? Because I moved out, I said, and I stopped paying. There was a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough to hear his brain trying to reorganize the world. You can't just do that. I just did. We live together. No, I said. You told me your ex lives with you now. I adjusted. His tone sharpened right away. This is about control. You're trying to scare me. I smiled without humor. Evan, if you were scared, you would have asked me how I felt before moving another woman into our apartment. He snapped back fast. You're being petty. I stayed calm. I'm being consistent. Then he started listing things. How unfair this was. How inconvenient. How I was blindsiding him. How he hadn't budgeted for all of this. That was the first time his voice changed. The first crack. Not yet panic, but uncertainty. Rent was due soon, he said. He needed time. He thought we'd figure something out. You'll figure it out, I said, using his exact words from the night before. This isn't up for discussion. He went quiet. Then, softer now, you said no problem. I meant it, I replied. It stopped being my problem. He hung up without saying goodbye. Later that night, another text came in. He says I'm overreacting. He'll help a little. I read that twice. That was the moment it really hit him, I think. Not that I had left. Not even that the bills were now his problem. But that the woman he moved in did not come with a solution attached. She came with opinions. With history. With complications. But not with rent money. And suddenly, for a while, was starting to sound very expensive. The day before rent was due, Evan showed up at my work. No warning. No text. Just him standing in the lobby like the universe had personally wronged him and I needed to fix it. The receptionist messaged me upstairs asking if I was expecting someone. I wasn't, but I went down anyway because curiosity has always been one of my worst habits. He looked different than the night I left. Not heartbroken, not devastated, just stressed. His hair was messy, his jacket wrinkled, his phone clutched in one hand like evidence in a trial. We need to talk, he said the second he saw me. Okay, I replied. That answer surprised him. He had clearly prepared himself for resistance. We stepped outside where the late afternoon air carried the sound of traffic and construction somewhere down the street. Evan started pacing almost immediately. You didn't tell me you were paying everything, he said. Rent, utilities, internet, everything. I leaned against the railing and crossed my arms. I did tell you, I said, just not in a way you paid attention to. You made it sound like we were splitting things. We were, I replied. I just covered your half. He blinked. That's not the same thing. It is when the bills arrive. He ran a hand through his hair and paced again. His shoes clicked sharply against the concrete like he needed the noise to keep the conversation moving. He said he'd help, Evan continued quickly. I waited. He said he would pitch in. Who? He looked at me like the answer should be obvious. My ex. I almost laughed. And? He can't right now. He's still looking for work. I nodded slowly. So your solution was to bring in someone who also can't pay rent. His face tightened. You're twisting this. Am I? He changed direction instantly, switching tactics the way people do when logic fails. This isn't fair, he said. You blindsided me. You told me another person was moving into our home and that it wasn't up for discussion, I replied calmly. That felt like the definition of fair at the time. He stopped pacing. Rent is due tomorrow, he said finally. I didn't plan for this. There it was. The first honest sentence he had said since the conversation started. You'll figure it out, I said. His eyes narrowed. You're enjoying this. No, I said, I'm observing it. He looked at me like I had suddenly started speaking another language. Can you just cover this month? He asked. The edge was gone now. Just until next week so I can get things straight. I shook my head. No. His expression hardened instantly. Wow, he said. So that's it. I was done when you replaced me and expected me to keep paying. He stared at me like he was seeing someone else entirely. Maybe I never knew you at all, he said. Maybe not, I replied. He stood there another few seconds before turning and walking back toward the parking lot. As he left, he muttered something under his breath. I never thought you'd actually leave. I didn't follow him, because the truth was, I hadn't just left. I had stopped holding everything together. Rent day arrived quietly. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting match. Just an email notification that landed in Evan's inbox at 9:03 in the morning. I know the exact time because he texted me 4 minutes later. Did you seriously tell the landlord you're not paying? I was already at my desk when the message arrived. Coffee half finished, inbox open, the steady rhythm of work continuing like nothing unusual had happened. I replied calmly. I told him I moved out. That's accurate. 3 dots appeared immediately. This is insane. He's expecting the full amount. I waited 5 minutes before responding. Not to be cruel. just to let the situation finish introducing itself. Yes. The calls started almost instantly after that. I declined all of them. 10 minutes later, another text appeared. Okay, listen. We can talk about him leaving. This doesn't have to blow up like this. There it was. The first real negotiation. Not about boundaries. Not about respect. About money. I replied once. You said it wasn't up for discussion. He didn't answer for a while. Then a voice memo arrived. I didn't play it. I could already imagine the tone. Controlled panic layered over frustration, trying to sound reasonable while the ground shifted underneath him. At lunch, my friend Chris asked if everything was okay. Yeah, I said, and for the first time, it wasn't a lie. At 2:15, another text appeared. He can't help. He thought I had this handled. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about the conversation happening inside the apartment. Evan had promised stability. He had promised that the situation was under control. And now both of them were realizing that the control had always been borrowed from me. At 4:40, the landlord emailed again. Please confirm payment by end of business day to avoid late fees. He accidentally copied me on the message. Evan immediately texted again. Can you please just spot me until next week? I stared at the message longer this time. Then I replied. No. He called again immediately. This time I answered. You want me to struggle? He accused. No, I said calmly. I want distance. This is distance. He snapped back. You could have talked to me first. I did talk to you, I said. You told me it wasn't up for discussion. Silence. Then his voice softened suddenly. He's willing to leave. I almost smiled. Normal doesn't exist anymore, I said. What do you mean? Normal was me paying while you decided things. There was a long pause. Then the line went dead. That evening I learned something else through a mutual friend. Once Evan realized he actually needed help with rent, his ex suddenly remembered somewhere else she could stay. Turns out she was perfectly comfortable visiting, just not funding. By Thursday, the situation had shifted from inconvenience to crisis. Evan showed up at Chris's apartment that evening without warning. Chris texted me first. She's here and she's not calm. When I walked in 20 minutes later, Evan was sitting on the arm of the couch like he had already decided the place belonged to him. His phone was in his hand and his leg bounced constantly, the way people move when frustration has nowhere to go. So this is where you ran off to, he said the moment I walked in. I set my bag down slowly and told him I didn't run. I relocated. He laughed under his breath, but the confidence behind it sounded thinner now. Cute, he said. Chris read the room perfectly and disappeared into his bedroom without saying anything else. Evan launched straight into the problem. I had to borrow money from my sister, he said. I waited, because silence forces people to keep talking when they expect interruption. I didn't know what to say when she asked why, he continued. I told him that sounded uncomfortable. His eyes narrowed immediately. You're enjoying this. I shook my head and said the same thing I had already told him twice before. I wasn't enjoying anything. I was simply no longer fixing it. That sentence irritated him more than anger would have. You don't care anymore, he said. I told him I cared when he told me another woman was moving into the apartment and then shut me down. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he said quickly, She's leaving. That doesn't change anything. I looked at him and asked if he was sure about that. His voice got louder. That's what you wanted, right? I answered honestly. What I wanted was a partner who didn't make life-altering decisions and then expect me to quietly fund them. For the first time, he looked uncertain. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before frustration took over again. So you're perfect now, he asked. I told him no, I was just finished. He laughed sharply and said I would regret it. Maybe I would. But I knew I wouldn't regret staying silent after being told my opinion didn't matter. Evan grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned around and said, You really screwed me. I answered honestly again. You screwed yourself. I just stopped holding things together. When the door closed behind him, the room felt lighter immediately. The chaos wasn't following me anymore. It had stayed with him. Friday morning came with a kind of quiet that only shows up when a storm finally runs out of energy. No texts, no calls, no emotional speeches. Later that day, the landlord called me to confirm a few final details about the lease transfer. During the conversation, he mentioned Evan had been frantic the night before, asking about extensions and payment plans. Apparently, Evan tried explaining that his financial situation had changed suddenly. I almost laughed when I heard that. Funny how sudden everything feels when the person carrying it finally steps away. Around noon, Evan sent another message. Short this time, flat. She moved out. I read it, locked my phone, and went back to work. About an hour later, another message appeared. I didn't think it would get this bad. That one almost worked. Almost. If it had come days earlier, it might have meant something different. Instead, I replied with the only honest answer left. I did. That evening, I ran into one of Evan's friends at a bar after work. She gave me the look people use when they think they know the story but are still trying to confirm it. She's really struggling, the friend said carefully. Apparently, Evan had been telling people I abandoned him right when things got difficult. I nodded because from his perspective, that was probably true. When someone spends months carrying the quiet parts of your life and then suddenly stops, it feels like abandonment. What he never understood was that the relationship didn't end the night I moved out. It ended the moment he decided my voice didn't matter in my own home. The following Monday, the situation reached its final form. Evan managed to scrape together enough money to partially cover rent after negotiating a short extension with the landlord. His ex was gone. The apartment was quieter, but the confidence he once carried about the situation had disappeared. A mutual friend told me he had been complaining about how unfair everything was, that he never expected me to actually leave. That sentence explained the entire relationship better than anything else he had ever said. Evan didn't miscalculate the situation. He miscalculated me. He believed love meant I would always tolerate whatever decision he made. A week later, I moved into a new apartment of my own, smaller place, but brighter. No shared bills, no half-explained decisions, no third presence hovering in the background of the relationship. I unpacked everything in one night, set up the utilities in my name, and sat in the middle of the living room for a long time just listening to the quiet. The difference between chaos and peace is sometimes nothing more than the absence of someone else's assumptions. A month later, I heard through the same friend that Evan's ex had disappeared the moment rent became real. Apparently, she said the situation wasn't what she signed up for. That part didn't surprise me. People are often comfortable taking space in someone else's life, as long as they don't have to carry any of the weight. Evan had spent months assuming I would keep carrying it for him. The moment that stopped, everything else collapsed around him. When people ask what happened between us now, I keep the explanation simple. He told me his ex would always come first, and that my opinion didn't matter. I believed him. That answer tends to end the conversation quickly, because the truth is rarely complicated. The relationship didn't fall apart because another person existed in his life. It ended because he expected me to stay while he rearranged everything around her. Sometimes walking away doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it's just one calm decision made at the right moment. I said no problem, and for the first time in years, that sentence was completely honest. The problem wasn't mine anymore.